The Astartes or Space Marines are the angels of death of the Emperor of Mankind. They were created for the Great Crusade as a better version of the Thunder Warriors of the Unification Wars. They are better in every way, but most of all better mentally than their precursors. But they are not perfect, since they are susceptible to chaos corruption, becoming traitors and renegades, as well as having geneseed defects and curses. So during the Horus heresy, half of the legions of the Imperium turned against the Emperor, half of the Astartes. So with the exception of the Alpha Legion and maybe the Night Lords, all of the Astartes followed their traitor primarchs to become Chaos Space Marines, embracing the ruinous powers as their gods, and intertwining themselves with the Chaos powers. So now the question arises, can these Chaos Marines die? And if they do, what happens to them? So let's get to it. Alright, so the Chaos Space Marines are traitor Astartes who have turned to the worship of the malevolent Chaos gods. Some alongside their primarchs have pledged allegiance to the Chaos gods collectively known as Chaos Undivided, and others have dedicated themselves to serving just one of these Chaos deities. Once astute and stoic warriors of the Imperium, they have now embraced pleasures, wealth, and mayhem, seeking power over honor and loyalty to the Emperor. Many of these Chaos Marines have their bodies and armor wrapped around the influence of the warp, often taking on grotesque and inhuman forms. They are now driven by a hunger for power and pleasure, initially focused on specific goals, but over time they have turned into obsessions and uncontrollable urges and rage. So while the Chaos Gods do reward their followers with gifts, these rewards are fickle and too far and few in between, and many of the traitor Astartes are instead mutated into Chaos spawns. The set gifts that were blessed on the ones that have served their Chaos Masters often reflect upon their deeds in battle and are often given to them for a specific purpose, and that is to further their service towards their ruinous deity. For example, the Plague Marines are of course of Nurgle, and they are blessed with diseases, boils, putrid and foul smells, just to name a few, to further the goals of Nurgle, while the Emperor's children are given mutations resembling pleasure and torture devices and organs. The World Eaters are given berserker rage and all types of spiky outgrowths, fangs and claws to further their efficiency in slaughter and mayhem. The ones serving Tzeentch often receive power-ups to their psychic powers, but at the same time their souls are damned for eternity, forever serving goals that are ever-changing as is Tzeentch's nature. So for the question, can Chaos Space Marines die in battle or old age? Well, a Chaos Space Marine doesn't really just gain immortality simply by entering the warp, or by falling into worship of any of the four ruinous powers. They remain mortal until they are decided by the deities that their service is essential for the great game or for campaigns in real space, and that's just for a selected few. Even after being corrupted and mutated by chaos, most of the Chaos Space Marines are still mortal. They are needed to be this way so that they can enter and exit real space at any given moment of choice, since the main demonic forces require certain criteria to be met to be summoned to the material realm, and if they are limited by an undefined period of time, which is why cults and rituals are essential for the Chaos Gods. They serve as a conduit for the demonic powers to enter the real world, which is why the next best things are the mortals serving these warp entities, and what better than the mortal Astartes that have pledged their allegiance to them. So can a Chaos Space Marine die in battle? Of course. As for dying of old age, there are no accounts as to this, as to my knowledge. If any of you know something that we don't, you can tell us in the comments section below. Personally, I would presume that since the Astartes are already designed to live for thousands of years, being in the warp might just take them out of the normal time-space continuum, and hence most of them haven't even lived more than a few centuries or millennia as compared to normal time. Imagine being inside a warp is like switching off your phone battery, and then when you come to real space, you turn it back on. So even if the phone is switched off for weeks, it can still be turned on, that is with minimal loss in battery power. I hope you can catch my drift. Most of the Chaos Space Marines that have died in battle are the ones that died during the Horus heresy, and yet still many of them which are alive today are still the same ones from that time period of 31k, from over 11,000 years ago. That is, they may die of old age, but their exposure to real time and real space is greatly limited since they spend most of their time inside the Imperium. Now, speaking about the Chaos Marines in the warp, what really happens to them if they are there? Well, they are still flesh and bone, and many of them still are vulnerable to the entities inside of it. Chaos Space Marines and the other followers of Chaos, They still use warp drives and void ships, much like the Imperial ships, but they do have less to fear from the Imperium compared to their Imperial counterparts. They often have the Chaos Gods manipulating the warp to aid them, creating faster warp currents, favorable warp storms, and providing navigational shortcuts that the Imperium cannot access. However, they are still not immune to the dangers in the warp, and many Chaos warships still use Geller fields for protection. Failure of these shields can result in gruesome fates, as seen in the case of the Talon of Horus, this vessel where everyone on board was torn apart except for those possessed by demons, the Justarian. The Word Bearers are an exception though, as they do not use Geller fields at all, leaving their survival in the warp a mystery. I would suspect that the Chaos Marines that serve just one specific deity, like Slanesh for example, would be in danger from the demons and wrath of the other three Chaos Gods, and so on and so forth. But for the ones that serve Chaos Undivided, this is more or less a game of chance, and their survival would be under the flimsy whims of the ruinous powers. So going back to the main topic, the Chaos Space Marines that receive Chaos Blessings are still mortals, and they do not live forever, but their chances of dying are greatly reduced with their mutations and Chaos gifts, turning their power and durability levels up a couple of notches. But what if the Chaos Marine was possessed by a demon, or thus becoming a demon prince changed things? And what about Chaos Champions, or the ones really hated by the ruinous powers? So possession by a demon also doesn't really make them immortal. They still remain flesh and blood, but their mind and body is controlled by the warp entity. Successful banishment of the demon would turn the Chaos Marine back into a more vulnerable form, which can be killed more easily. This is something more easy said than done, since the demons of the Chaos Gods each have a specific name, and reciting their names, especially that of the greater demons, do pose significant life risk to the one pronouncing the unholy syllables that is attached to the demon's true moniker. So in short, the Chaos Marines possessed by demons are still mortals. But certain Chaos Space Marines do in fact become immortal, and hence cannot be killed. These are the ones that have either become a demon prince, meaning that they indeed were ones who had devoted themselves to chaos and had undertaken a highly important dangerous task for their gods, and in their success, they achieved demonhood, thus giving away their human form for the power and immortality of a demon, and thus becoming warp energy much like the other demons. But even this is half likely, as many of the demon princes like Abraxas and Kernak Voldorius were stated to have been slain in battle, with the latter having his head decapitated by Korsaro Khan of the White Scars. But this is highly likely that since they have attained demonhood, their essence would have been sent back to the warp, akin to a banishment, with pieces of their true self having to reform inside the Imperium, which would take an untold duration of time, and the rest of the body that is slain would just stay there in the material realm. Okay, so then there are the champions of the Chaos Gods who are truly immortal. These are the likes of Khan the Betrayer, Lucius the Eternal, who can resurrect from the body of another one that slays him in battle and finds pleasure in the act. And the same cannot be said though for Ahriman and Typhus. But we can assume that at least they are blessed with immortality as long as they are still favored by their Chaos Gods. These champions are not demon princes, mind you, because at the moment they become demons they have to play by the rules of the warp, which limits their usefulness in real space to a large degree. It makes them vulnerable to banishment, and their names become their weakness. So since they are needed to be the best of the best of the fighters of the deities without having the weaknesses of the greater demons, they still maintain their mortal forms, albeit greatly enhanced in power, durability, and most of all, being unkillable until they fall out of favor with their Chaos God. So now that we have established the mortality of the Chaos Marines, let's take a look at a couple of exceptions, aside from the Demon Princes and these champions. Firstly, we have the Rubric Marines, which are the spectral remains of the Thousand Sons Astartes, who are trapped within their ancient power armors, as mindless beings, as a result of the Rubric of Ahriman. They are remorseless and unliving, cursed to exist without true mortality or immortality. Encased in their power armors like sealed tombs, they are almost unkillable, and the only complete destruction of their power armor can release their trapped spirits and make them immobile or harmless, and even this doesn't guarantee their deaths, as reforging of the armor or making of a new armor can force the dusty spirit to be sealed again in an unending cycle of unliving existence. Then there is also the strange case of Fabius Bile and his cloning. This former chief apothecary of the Emperor's children is a Chaos Space Marine that is in a love-hate dysfunctional relationship with Slaanesh, to say the least. He is one of the brightest minds in the Chaos factions, a brilliant geneticist and a mad scientist. After his many years of experiments and testing, he had finally succeeded in creating numerous clones of himself, of primarchs, other space marines, and a lot more. But most of all, the most peculiar things are the clones of himself, and he can implant his brain into them to prolong his life. Therefore, if his current body is, let's say, close to expiry date, he can just implant his mind on another one, and thus creating his own type of immortality. In conclusion, most of the Chaos Space Marines are mortal, even the possessed ones and the ones with massive amounts of disgusting blessings. The only immortal ones are the champions of the Chaos Gods and the Demon Princes, as well as the Rubric Marines and the clones of Bile, which are strange exceptions. So lastly, as to how many of the original Chaos Space Marines are left, not much really, given their high mortality rates in combat and the heavy attrition rate over the thousands of years of Chaos crusades and fighting against both the Imperium forces and at times also against other Xenos races and the Eldar. So shouldn't they be heavily weakened by now? The answer is actually no, since from the worlds that they do conquer or enslave, they do recruit aspirants to fill and replenish their ranks and numbers. The main problem for them is the number of geneseeds that over the years, their stock has diminished greatly, with them resorting to looting and raiding the loyalist geneseed stocks to create new Chaos Space Marines. So that is actually how they are still great in numbers, albeit lesser than their full force during the Horus heresy, which can be stated to be their maximum strength levels. Also, they are still lesser than what they were during the Great Scouring, cause during this time, the Chaos Space Marines were still numerous and were still in legions before the formation of warbands and all that. But due to the death of Horus and no presence of any real leaders or leading faction, they started to drop dead to the advancing loyalists in great amounts. So that's all we have for today. If you like this video, then watch this other one as well, and if you want to browse for other Warhammer content, then check out our channel. So subscribe and like for support, and yeah, while you're at it, bang on the bell icon for notifications on new video uploads. Till the next time, take care, boys.